Alrighty, so I'll give you a few updates. I got a blooming bit of a cold at the moment, which is a bit odd. We've had quite a bit of rain recently, which is sort of unexpected as well. Work's going all right. There's one bloke I work with. He's sometimes he has his good days and he has his bad days, and he had a bitch the other day that I didn't use the right screws, but then he left me with no screws that were the right type, and stupid shit like that. But anyway, I sort of, I'm going along alright some days, and other days it's a bit sort of annoying, but, I'm sort of getting the knack of not doing what most apprentices do, and I was doing myself in the start, which is, all the stupid little blunders sort of things, doing things the hard way, and accidentally breaking sheets and stuff like that. But I'm getting better, and I think he won't be quite as grumpy as I get better, but Anyway, I got my second lot of pay. It included the, 2 hours off for going to the funeral, and it worked out, it was like 635, 640, something like that. So it isn't too bad. We got signed up for all the apprenticeship and got all the papers sorted on all that. And I'm still waiting for some of those papers to appear so that I can get all the little government rebates. And I will make another video involving about 3 different things, and there's a particular sort of incentive I get, which I will have an option of getting, which I'm going to take, but I don't want to talk about that publicly. But I'll talk about that in another video, and that might help things along a bit. It's there's some people who I would prefer not to know everything, and the majority of you, you can find out, and I'll hand it around, and if you want it, PM me, and I'll give you the URL for that hidden video. But anyways, I'll tell you what, it's sort of different working on those commercial jobs compared to domestic jobs, because you don't have to deal with the public and the stupid questions. Like, I get some dumb shit questions sometimes that, you've got these trophy wives and wives of accountants and stuff like that, and holy smoke, there's some people, I don't know how they've got to life this far at this point, you'll sort of end up, if you don't get screws in. I used to remember this with Bagolas, for instance. I'll give you an example. There's screws, and you would have known this with your self-tapping cutting head screws. I don't think I've got any sitting around here. I probably do, but anyway, the steel cutting heads. You'd have some of those, and you go to push, and the blasted things come off the end of the drill. Well, they'd find them and then say, well, there's a screw here. That means there's a screw missing in the roof, therefore it's not structurally safe. Hang on, the company gave us double the amount of screws we needed. We dropped one, and then you assume that it's one less in the roof somehow? Oh, God, blimey. It just fell off the end of the drill. The other one is it had these little things where you've got bits that are basically like this, where you get your beam that runs across there, and it'd have these 2 dirty-ass bolts. So you got this little plastic cover. You get a bit of silicone, you slop it on there, and just sit a little cover on it, and it just sort of click onto one of the bolts or one of the holes or something like that. And anyway, of course, it's a bit of a dusty day, and they got a bit of dust on the actual beam, and then they put the silicone on the bit of plastic and then whacked it on. Well, the damn thing fell off. and they've got this little bit of plastic crap in their hand going to you, is this going to affect the structural integrity of the building? It's a cover. How's it going to affect anything? Just think, God blimey. We'd get sometimes roof sheets that were too long or whatever, and what you do is you just bang them on anyway, and then you get up on top of that same sort of that beam there, one of your battens or something like that. And these ones, were a bit heavier than an old house made in the 1800s, and you'd be able to walk along the top of it, or get your trestles and all that set up with your beams, like your big aluminium planks, so to speak, that you'd lay on top of your trestles so you could walk along, and you go along with the angle grinder and you'd cut off this end, to keep it reasonably straight, because they'd be too long and they might be hanging out, 2.5 foot too long, sort of thing. And then after you've done that, you'd put the gutter on. Well, in that, and also primarily where you'd put your screws through there, your tech cutting head would go through, and of course you got swarf because it's cut through the actual damn sheet to get into your beam underneath. As a result, that swarf would end up in the gutter, and then there'd be rust, and then you'd have people going, "Oh, this is bloody useless, it's 2 weeks old and it's rusting." I mean, this is how stupid some of the people were. Couldn't work out where the rust has come from. Well, hello, we've put all these flaming screws in, which means there's a hole, which means there's swarf, that's where the rust is from, and they think the whole thing's rusting to bits after 2 weeks. Another one that was an absolute beauty one time. We had, I won't go into it, but let's just put it like this, real hardline lefty idiot, and this pergola, they were given 2 options, and it was actually my mate who was a salesman for this one, and they wanted white. Okay, we can have white. They're given 2 options. You can have white on the top and white underneath. Now, mind you, this is going in suburbia. It's going about bloody 2 foot off the neighbour's fence. And you can either have a white on top or white underneath. And I think the other option was cream on top, cream underneath. And all the other options were whatever colour you wanted underneath, including cream and white, but then just boring ass grey on the top, just like this shitty, this primer that was no big deal. Was waterproof, but it didn't look very great. It was pretty drab. And they were given the 2 options because they had a white one, and they turned around and said, "No, we don't want that." And when they got there, then they complained about it and said that, and then here we are with this grey primer. It's obviously paint because it's like a brownish grey. She turns around and goes, "Oh, is this bare steel? Does it look like bare steel?" You only ever end up working in with a whole stack of other tradespeople who are professionals with no stupid ass questions and brainless crap, and you go to do something and then they go running inside and ring the foreman and ring him up and say, "This bloke doesn't know what he's doing." "Oh, hang on, he's been doing it for 12 years. I think he knows what he's doing." That was another one that used to happen. We needed to put some sort of a support inside on the roof trusses so that the sheets and all that had a place to, there's a channel, they riveted on the channel, and the channel had to be anchored into something, which was these bars we'd put inside, not exactly bars, but yeah, on the roof trusses. And then they'd turn around and go, "Oh, he's lifting the roof up in my house, doesn't know what he's doing." No, we know exactly what we're doing. 12 years on, I think he knows what he's doing. But yeah, it's sort of, good that everybody there's got half a bloody clue about what's going on. You don't get any stupid questions and all that stuff. And in that way, it's very domestic because there's no public at all. And the rates are a lot higher, and it's all unionised and all that sort of stuff, and whatnot. But yeah, it's the money factor is phenomenal. you Americans might be surprised when I start talking about people's wages here. Keep in mind that over in Australia, a lot of things cost double to triple the price. Like, for instance, Troy noticed that big time. He said that for what he can get a takeaway cup of coffee for here, he can get a whole pound of coffee beans for in the States, you know. And but all the same, it's reasonably high wages regardless. A lot of these blokes work on the Saturday, a 7-hour day on the Saturday or something like that. And that's all overtime, but they basically get between $1,500 and $1,800 a week. That's quite common. That's what they take home. That's not before tax, that's after tax. Before tax, 2,000, 2,350, something, you know, probably even higher than that. But yeah, 1,500 to 1,800 a week is quite common, you know, and a lot of the other tradespeople there are getting about 1,200 a week and whatnot. But I think it's that overtime that helps things along. And I don't do the Saturdays, and I don't really feel like it because there's been a few pay blunders apparently involving people doing Saturdays, and they're great. You know, I asked one bloke about, I said the last Chinese boss of the vineyard, the pay was a little bit funny. You know, is it going to be like that with this boss? And they said, well, it can't be because there's a union here. And then you find out that there's still plenty of pay blunders regardless. But yeah, I don't think there's a point in me doing Saturday work if I'm not going to get paid for it. And that, but yeah, it's actually not a heap, but it's not too bad either what I'll end up getting from the government as an extra thing. In some apprenticeships, the employer gets it, and other ones, it's the actual person. In this one, it's the actual person, me, who gets the other government incentives. You'd be quite surprised to think how much it is. It's not tons, but it's not what I would have expected them to hand me over, you know, without a fight. But there is a lot of forms in that involved, and whatnot. But yeah, it's got the old cardboard house here. She's I won't show her. I might as well show it. She had a few roof troubles, so I've had a bit of a fill up with expansion foam. Quite a bad roof trouble that I didn't really take a good look at for a while. But there'll be another video on that. There'll be another video on the agave plants as well, which you'll see when you see it. Will tell you though, the waste on these sites, you just would not believe it. If a screw falls off the end of your drill, you just leave it there. There are screws, nuts, bolts, all that just getting put inside walls and that because they couldn't be bothered picking them up. Sometimes the offcuts get thrown inside the wall because they couldn't be bothered to put them in a bin, because then you got to take them out to the dumpster later on. And, you know, and if you stole 10,000 screws, nobody would even notice. I'll tell you what, there must be a real buck in if I don't end up in plastering in the long term, I want to end up in the skip business. Now, there are some businesses who, oh, no, ooh, cold again. There was one business, I think they've gone bankrupt though, that used to recycle rubbish. And what they found is you could go there and dump your rubbish off, and it was cheaper than going to the normal, you know, government landfill. And they realised that 86% of what they got out, they could actually recycle. And, of course, your bricks and your concrete and all that turn into, like they put it through a crusher and then sell it as crushed rock for driveways and, you know, driveway patch-ups and, you know, trying to keep the mud down or whatever in certain areas. You know, if you need a bit of gravel for putting down a little concrete slab or whatever for doing a garden shed, you know, they'd sell that stuff on the side. They even had a thing which would, any sand or any clay, it'd sort of sort out the two like that as well. And of course they got a lot of steel, and they'd deal with all the steel, all the timber. They'd go and turn into wood chips. You know, they sort of were like that. And I sort of was always interested in that sort of industry and whatnot. And I'll tell you what, with the amount of, like, if they've got, you know, a handful left in a packet, they just throw the whole packet in the bin. You know, I've seen giant bolts with a big blooming half-inch shank in a bag chucked in the bin. I've seen, I was tempted to grab it, but you don't want to get yourself the sack over something stupid like this. You know, 15 metres of flipping cable, you know. Now this wasn't once, there's forever big bundles of cable going in the bin. These are copper wires, you know, and it's like, hell, copper's worth a bit as scrap. And here they are throwing a 15 metre two-piece cable for a fire alarm in the bin, along with a whole shit ton of other ones that are, you know, only 2 or 3 metres long or whatever. And you just sort of think, I can't believe this. And the amount of stuff that just gets thrown away, it's just about criminal. You know, so much good stuff. And I sort of thought, if you could actually clean out those skip bins, you'd end up with so many extra bags of screws. You could probably have one of these renovator stores, you know, they've got ones where they demolish houses and they go and keep all the wood heaters, any blooming windows that are any good, any doors that are any good, you know, and all that. And these renovator centres have all that. And they got a lot of old antique-y sort of things and whatnot at these renovator centres and that. I mean, they even keep the skirting boards and everything. But in all of that, they resell those things out of demolished houses. But you could have a place like that that literally sold all the damn leftover cables, all the leftover bolts, all the leftover screws, and any other materials that, you know, were decent length that were left over. And there's just bucket loads of it, and it just all gets chucked in the bin. You know, and it's shocking how much there is. Furthermore, if you could find some good use for plasterboard and fibre cement sheeting to be ground up to be reused, they've got these 3D printed houses in China which use industrial waste and cement, and it comes out looking like some sort of a cement sort of stuff with a consistency of thick tomato sauce or whatever, you know, and they go and make, like, print out whole buildings with this big robotic arm, and you've got to wait for the whole lot to dry, and then, you know, a few days later it's all, I think it takes 2 days to print the thing out, but, and you give it, you know, a week for the concrete to set, or another 2 days for it to set, or something like that. But I just sort of look at all this plasterboard and all this fibre cement offcuts and all that, and think, I wonder if they could be ground up, mixed with cement, and, you know, used for something like those 3D printed houses, or for somebody who wanted to get into doing something where they reuse that plaster of Paris, even if they have to put it in a kiln to burn all the paper out of it, or something like that, and then just be left with the plaster of Paris and basically a few threads of fiberglass which usually come in it. And yeah, you know, you sort of get some of these ideas, you know, is there a way I could do something to recycle it? You know, plus with all the screws and the bolts that you'd be selling and all the scrap metal and whatnot, you'd probably make a killing out of it all. You'd probably make a killing out of scrap metal and flipping scrap copper alone, you know, but that's something that I've sort of been thinking about. But I've heard of some big jobs where things get stolen, and one of the ones that was getting stolen was whole pallets of plaster, and where the bloke screwed up, the foreman was nicking these whole pallets of plaster and getting them taken out by a truck back to his own house. And where he screwed up is he employed some of the plasterers there to go and plaster this new house that he was building for his family. And some of them blabbed, didn't they? And that's where he got sprung. But if he had used outside plasterers, he probably would have been able to keep all this plaster. And he basically stole enough to, oh, my nose annoying me, to do his entire house. And this, I don't know if it was a different foreman or a higher up, manager or whatever, but yeah, some jobs are that big that entire pallets of stuff go missing and people don't even know where they're gone. But that's a real super big jobs. That's the malls and stuff like that where things are really large. But yeah, anyway, those of you who want to see the other videos, PM me.